Now that we have established our main patches of value, now we can go in and really refine this thing. We can kind of start to pick out those shadows within our shadows, those lights within our lights. So you can see here that the lower right area of my apple, or of our apple in this case, is a bit darker. So I'm going in and I'm layering in some more charcoal to really beef up that contrast. When you look at this object in space with the given light source, you can see that this is not a middle key drawing. We see that there's contrast. There's very light areas, very dark areas. So we want to make sure that we capture that full range of value there. So again, you can see that I'm being careful to kind of be soft with my approach. I'm changing directions of my coloring, and you should definitely do that too, because we don't want really hard hatching lines all over the place, because that's not what we see in front of us. The surface of our apple is fairly smooth. We do have that kind of dappled dotted pattern, which I'll be indicating here as I work my way up my apple. But for now, I'm establishing those stronger shadows that will give my apple its compositional weight. Remember that value scale, we're using all of those. So again, you will build these up gradually, right? So now I need to go in and think about, okay, what's going on with that upper area of my apple, right? So of course, you can use different types of mark making. I'm going to use kind of a scrubbing motion with my pencil instead of back and forth long strokes like I was doing earlier. And this will help give that impression of texture that we see. If you're not sure how to do your textures, or if you want to practice a little bit on the side before tackling it on your main object, I highly suggest that. You can do them next to your value scales. You can just play around on a scrap piece of paper. But just practice getting different types of marks, right? What happens when you do a little scrubbing motion with your pencil? What happens when you do little dots? What happens when you kind of just do random marks? And that can help you to figure out exactly what you're capable of and what textures would be appropriate for your object, right? So again, here you can see that I'm adding in some dots. Again, if they look very sharp, that's okay. I will be blending them and smudging them so they will be softer, which of course brings us to another point, is the idea that I haven't really blended too much yet in this particular piece, because I am going to do that now, right? So again, use the tool that you need to achieve the best results in a timely manner. You can see that I'm using a rag wrapped around my finger to achieve a reasonably small area of blending. You can see that I'm softening up, I'm scrubbing around, getting that pigment to spread around and fill in those areas. Again, some of you guys might be thinking, oh no, we're covering our highlights. We can bring our eraser in later and pull those back out with some subtractive drawing. You can see that I'm also moving down to my ground, because again, we want to be economical. We want to forget that we don't want to forget the other areas of our drawing. Just focusing on the object will leave you with an empty space, right? So you can see that I'm softening up my ground, right? Taking care not to get too wild with it. If you're noticing that you need more smaller areas of blending, you can use some of the tools that we've talked about, like a Q-tip or a blending stump or things like that. Now you can see that the beauty of layering, we can go back in with our charcoal pencil, and any areas where the blending got a little bit too soft, or if it kind of lightened up our tones too much, we can go in and fix that. Here you can see that I am adjusting my horizon line, because I noticed that that was looking a little wonky. So make little fixes as you go. That's why we're building up. We're working from general to specific to allow ourselves kind of the clearance and the space to make these adjustments as we go, right? So of course you can see apple's looking a little bit more substantial, but we're still not quite there. Remember, process is very important. So of course, now I'm working up down the top of my apple, and I need to figure out how to achieve that contrast in my little stem area. So you can see that I'm applying greater pressure, because I know that's a darker area based on looking at my object. And I'm using, like I said, that little scrubbing motion. I'm sort of lightly scrubbing the surface of my paper with the tip of my pencil to get a softer filling in of the tone, right? So again, I'm being very careful. I am looking at my object, because when you're applying charcoal this dark, it's not going to be able to be erased all the way if you make a mistake. So it's important to, like I said, build up so that you don't put yourself in a spot where you messed up and now you have this big pentimenty area that isn't working for you. So now I'm going to do that area where the skin looks a little bit crazy up at the top, and I'm going to use my eraser now to pull back and to lighten up those areas that got a little bit wild with my with my blending. I'm using my gum eraser. You can use any eraser you'd like, depending on what type of space you're going for. Some people really love to use the kneaded erasers for this part because you can mold it to the exact shape. You can see that my eraser lines are very big and bulky, which is okay because I'll be able to fix it. Which as you can see, blending with my finger. And of course, using the eraser as a drawing tool is something that is going to give us some really beautiful areas of light and highlight. So definitely don't forget that your eraser is not just for fixing your boo-boos, it's for, again, pulling back those areas and working subtractively as well as additively. So now that we're working and we're starting to get more of a substantial value spectrum, again, I'm kind of starting to pull out those details in the pit area, that little bulge where the pit used to be. I'm kind of working her in there. So again, when in doubt, look at your actual object. Don't invent things. Don't generalize. Since we're all drawing from this apple, all know about it. So make sure that you're getting in there and that you're holding yourself accountable. And of course, you can see here, now that I have my base tones established, I can go in and add in all these nice little kind of dots. I'm just kind of lightly scrubbing my paper, kind of doing it in a sort of a random dot pattern. And of course, I'm being nice and soft with it because remember, when you look at this apple, it's again a nice mottled, dappled sort of effects that we got going on here. So I'm starting off at the lower area just to kind of build that stuff up because remember, not every object is just going to be perfectly smooth. Sometimes you'll have these smooth values and then you'll layer other textures on top. And that's a good technique to practice because that'll give you, again, even a richer tonal skill, right? So again, you can see I'm going all the way around my apple, working economically. You don't want to focus too much on one area. You want to kind of go around and make sure that you're attending to all your areas as you're working on things. I'm being very careful to avoid leaning my wrist or my hand on my actual apple itself. So make sure that you do that as well. Some people like to rotate their sketchbook or their paper to avoid smudging things. Um, so do what works best for you, but you want to make sure to avoid blending and smudging all of this beautiful hard work that you should be doing, right? So now I'm getting in there, putting in those last little dots before we finish this thing off.